Two of the wealthiest men in human history are currently waging an invisible war that will decide the future of our species. Most people look at the headlines and see a petty feud between billionaires, trading insults on social media and fighting over who has the biggest rocket. They see the memes, the wealth rankings, and the passive-aggressive tweets. But that is just the surface. Beneath the noise lies a ruthless corporate Cold War, fought with corporate espionage, aggressive patent litigation, and a race to monopolize the infrastructure of the solar system. This isn't just about ego or bragging rights. It is a conflict between two fundamentally opposing philosophies on how humanity should survive the next century. One wants to abandon Earth to save the light of consciousness. The other wants to industrialize space to save Earth as a garden. Whoever wins this battle won't just become the first trillionaire in space. They will essentially become the architect of human evolution for the next 1,000 years.
The origins of this galactic rivalry trace back to a remarkably quiet evening in 2004. Neither man was the titan they are today. Jeff Bezos was just the book guy from Amazon, and Elon Musk was the guy who had just sold PayPal. They met for a private dinner to discuss their shared obsession, which was opening up the space frontier. But the meal did not end with a partnership. It ended with a permanent ideological fracture. Musk reportedly left the meeting feeling that Bezos was barking up the wrong tree, wasting time on dead-end engineering philosophies. Bezos, on the other hand, viewed Musk as reckless and overly optimistic. That single dinner drew a line in the sand that has never been crossed since. While they started in similar places, their paths immediately diverged. Musk chose speed, chaos, and public failure as his primary tools for learning. Bezos chose silence, secrecy, and a slow, methodical march toward perfection. For years, they ignored each other, building their empires in parallel lanes. But space is only so big, and eventually their ambitions were bound to collide.
The Cold War turned hot in 2013 over a piece of concrete in Florida. This wasn't just any concrete. It was Launch Complex 39A, the historic site where Apollo 11 left for the moon. NASA was looking to lease the pad to a private company to save money on maintenance. SpaceX immediately moved to secure exclusive rights, needing the massive infrastructure for their Falcon rockets. Bezos, a self-proclaimed history fanatic, intervened at the last minute. He proposed running the pad as a shared spaceport, arguing that no single company should monopolize history. Musk was absolutely incensed. He publicly slammed the move as a phony blocking tactic, pointing out a brutal reality. Blue Origin hadn't even launched a suborbital rocket yet, let alone something capable of reaching the station. Musk essentially told the government that if Blue Origin ever built a rocket real enough to use the pad, he would happily let them use it. But until then, he wasn't waiting. The government agreed with Musk. SpaceX won the lease, and Bezos was left locked out of the historic gate. It was a humiliating public defeat, and it guaranteed that the gloves were coming off.
If the Launchpad was a territorial dispute, what happened next was intellectual property warfare. In 2014, Blue Origin made a move that could have strangled SpaceX in its crib. They secured a patent for landing a rocket booster vertically on a ship at sea. This concept was the holy grail of rocket economics. If you can land the booster, you can reuse it, saving millions of dollars per launch. SpaceX was already betting its entire future on developing this exact technology. Suddenly, Bezos held a piece of paper that could force Musk to pay him for every single landing. It was a brilliant, ruthless legal maneuver, reminiscent of the early days of aviation. But Musk didn't negotiate. He unleashed his legal team to scour the history books. They found old research papers from the 1990s, specifically from Japanese engineers, that described the exact same landing concept. SpaceX argued that the idea wasn't new, and therefore Bezos couldn't own it. The courts agreed. The patent was largely invalidated, stripping Bezos of his leverage. It was a critical victory for Musk. If he had lost that court battle, the reusable rocket revolution might have died in a courtroom instead of changing the world.
The rivalry reached its absolute peak when NASA decided it was time to return humans to the moon.
This was the Artemis program, and the prize was a nearly $3 billion contract to build the lunar lander. Everyone expected NASA to pick two winners to keep the competition alive, but Congress didn't give NASA enough money for two, so they picked one, and they picked SpaceX. The decision sent shockwaves through the industry. Bezos and Blue Origin were furious. They launched a massive protest with the government, freezing the entire moon program for months. They even released aggressive infographics mocking Musk's Starship design. They called it immensely complex and high risk, pointing out that astronauts would need an elevator to get down to the surface. It was a public relations disaster. The aerospace community mocked the graphics, noting the irony of a company with no orbital rockets criticizing the one company that was actually flying. Bezos eventually sued NASA in federal court, a move that burned a lot of bridges within the agency. He lost that lawsuit too. SpaceX kept the contract, and the gap between the two companies widened from a crack into a canyon.
The reason these men fight so hard isn't just business. It is because they are trying to build two completely different futures. Elon Musk is driven by a philosophy of fear and survival. He believes humanity is fragile and trapped on a single planet. His entire goal is to build a backup drive for civilization on Mars as quickly as possible. That is why he tolerates explosions and failure. Every day we aren't on Mars is another day we are vulnerable to extinction. Bezos sees it differently. He thinks Mars is a gloomy, frozen hellhole that is unfit for human happiness. His vision comes from a physicist named Gerard O'Neill. Bezos wants to build massive floating space stations close to Earth. These cylinders would have perfect weather, artificial gravity, and endless resources. He wants to move heavy industry off the planet to turn Earth into a protected residential zone. Musk wants to conquer the frontier. Bezos wants to build the suburbs. This fundamental disagreement drives every engineering choice their companies make. Musk builds massive, rugged transport ships. Bezos builds precise, methodical infrastructure.
Of course, when you have billions of dollars, the rivalry inevitably gets personal and petty. When Blue Origin landed their first suborbital tourist rocket, Bezos celebrated it as a historic achievement. Musk responded with a tweet simply saying, "Welcome to the club." It was a backhanded compliment. He was subtly reminding everyone that SpaceX had been landing orbital rockets for years, which is infinitely harder than a suborbital hop. The trolling escalated as their wealth fluctuated. When Musk surpassed Bezos as the richest man in the world, he didn't send a card. He reportedly sent a giant silver medal statue to Bezos, complete with the number 2 on it. But the ultimate irony might be found on the high seas. Bezos recently launched a $500 million superyacht, a masterpiece of luxury engineering. But eagle-eyed photographers noticed something on the deck. To get internet access in the middle of the ocean, Bezos had to install Starlink terminals. Even on his own private escape vessel, he couldn't escape Musk's network.
This rivalry is entertaining, but it carries a heavy implication for the rest of us. For the first time in history, space exploration is not being led by nations, it is being led by corporations. If Musk establishes the first colony on Mars, it won't initially be a democracy. It will be a company town. The oxygen you breathe, the water you drink, and the internet you use will all be owned by a private entity. Bezos's orbital habitats present the same reality. These men are not just building rockets, they are building the governance structures of the future. We are moving from the age of exploration into the age of privatization. The winner of this shadow war gets to write the terms of service for the final frontier. So while we watch the tweets and the lawsuits, we have to ask ourselves a question. Do we want a future defined by a desperate dash to Mars or a carefully zoned industrial orbit? Because ready or not, one of these visions is coming for us.
The friction between Musk and Bezos has likely accelerated space technology by decades. Without the pressure of competition, we might still be relying on old, disposable rockets. Their hatred for each other has become the engine of our progress, but it leaves us as passengers in a vehicle driven by two massive egos. As we look up at the night sky, we aren't just seeing stars anymore. We are seeing real estate,
and the landlords are already fighting over the keys. What do you think about this privatization of space? Does the idea of a corporate colony on Mars excite you, or does it sound like a dystopia waiting to happen? Let me know your take in the comments below.